There. So in this lesson we are going to start building the user interface. It's quite an involved lesson because what we're about to build is the thing we're going to be working in for the whole of the rest of this project. As I keep saying, this is not using any of the rendering tools in Unreal. This project is about using the blueprints in the UI. So it's not using any of the best bits about Unreal, but it also means that we don't need to look at the rest of Unreal, which is why I thought this would be useful. So I'm going to jump back to our Unreal projects, and you see when we left it, I have a completely blank scene, there's nothing in it. We've loaded the plugins. I'm going to come to content browser here, and I've already created a folder here called blueprints, and this is where I'm going to keep all my blueprints, which includes widgets. Widgets are called widgets because they're part of the user interface. They're things that you load up, but they are fundamentally blueprints underneath. I'll show you that in a second. So let's open this, and we're going to right click and go to create. In this panel we've got everything we'd ever want to make in Unreal. We've got blueprints, more levels. I mean, you could save a new level, but you could also just create one from scratch. All of the sort of the tools that you might want to build into your project. Down here under user interface there's a few things, but we want widget blueprints. This is the fundamental asset that's used to create the user interface. So we're going to create one of those. I'm given a toolbar here which I'll drag over so you can see it. Lots of different types of widgets that you might want come from the sort of the default layouts, but we're just going to create a normal user widget. It says here, the user widget is extensible by users through the widget blueprint. So we can click on that. It's created us a nice little widget. We're going to call it BP underscore, BP for blueprint, console UI, enter. So the reason I put the BP at the beginning is because it's a good format to have BP for blueprints. Later on when you're searching for something, if you type in BP underscore and search, it will just filter out everything that's not a blueprint. And you do that for a lot of things. So materials you prefix with an M, for instance. I'm going to talk about labeling quite a lot. Label everything every time you make it, whether it's a button or a label, anything you do, give it a name, because it will be a nightmare for you later on when you can't find something. And double click on it to load up the widget interface, and there it is. Now normally I dock this on two different screens because it's quite helpful to see it in different places. It's a full project effectively. You can dock it next to your map, and so you can sort of switch between the two. We're going to be working in this a lot, so I'm just going to leave it up here because I want it to have it big so I can see everything. Pretty much everything we're going to do in this whole tutorial series will be happening in this widget that we've just built. Now, there's a couple of things to point out here. First of all, there's two modes in the widget editor. You've got designer up here, which is what we're currently in. This is where you can build and create your entire UI. This is where things live, and you can place them in different places relative to your screen, and that's where it all looks nice for the user. In graph, you have all the stuff the user doesn't see. It's all the blueprinting. It's all the code. Now, we're going to be in here quite a lot, so we could be jumping backwards and forwards. Now, if you wanted to do blueprinting in a normal blueprint class, you could do. Everything we're learning here will pass across to normal blueprint classes. There are a few things that you will find in a blueprint class that you won't find in a widget blueprint, but nothing that we're working on this project will be missing. So this is absolutely fine for us to be using. Now, this may not be the right approach. This is just me. I'm going to stress as well that I'm not a developer. I'm self-taught. But what I'm showing you works. This may not be the best way of doing things. There might be a program out there that's just ready to automate because I'm suggesting things that aren't the normal practice. But what I would do is build all of my blueprint for the user interface into the UI widget, rather than build it somewhere else and call it. The reason for this is because the user interface will have all the sliders and the buttons loaded into this widget, and when that generates a number or a value or an event, I want to be able to see that in the same blueprint. I don't want to have to try and call it across to another one. There's a couple of times when we will do that, and we'll come to casting later on where we move details across different blueprints, but effectively everything can live in this one place now. So it's quite nice. It makes it nice and simple to teach. So we're going to start in Designer and see if I can get this to work. We first of all need to set the size of our screen. You can choose a screen size up here. You've got different phones and tablets that you can select as presets, and it will create a screen that's the correct size for you. We've got the 1080p, which is what we'd we're going to work on, but I'm actually going to do it by dragging out this arrow here. This arrow will define the size of your screen, and I want to make it HD, so I'm just going to pull it out to there, and it's just snapping to 1920 by 1080. There you go. You can see at the bottom left there, I can't show you the mouse because I'm using it, that's clicked onto 1920 by 1080. So drop that. That's now the size of an HD screen. So anything we lay out would be based on an HD screen. If you want to go to 4K, that's fine. It will just scale it all out. But if the proportions are slightly different, it might stretch things. There are lots of things that we can do to make that happen. You know, most apps scale across a whole range of screens. Unreal does that work for you, but you need to set up your UI to consider it. But for today, we're just working on an HD screen, and the important thing to know is where the corners are, where the center is, and then you position everything relative to that. First thing we're going to do is we're going to build a canvas, because that's where everything's going to live. So I'm going to type in canvas into the search panel here, and canvas panel comes up. I'm just going to click and drag that down here into this project hierarchy. Ooh, stick it on there under BB console. That's now created the screen. I can have lots of these, and they could actually live in different sizes, in different places. I can have canvases within canvases, and we may do that later, but for now that's where everything's going to live. And the first thing we're going to do is add a button to that. So the button's in one of our common folders. I'm just going to click and drag it into the widget here and just dump it somewhere. There we go. Now, I didn't label my canvas panel. That's fine, because it's going to be the only one I'm going to use in this project, I think, so no need to label it yet. But the button definitely needs labeling. It's currently called button 0. I'm going to call it button test, so I don't lose it. And it's just like that. It's a bit bland. I can click and drag it to make it bigger or smaller. You know, I've got size adjustments up here. I want to add some text to it though, make it clear what it is. I've got a little text field here, make sure this is still being seen. So I click and drag this down to button test, and it will dump it into the box. It's now nested inside that object. So you see all of these are part of the one underneath, also the one above it. This is what we call parenting and childing, or children's. So this is a child of its parent, and as long as they're connected, if I, so for instance, hide this, it will hide the text as well as underneath it. If I try to move this, it will move the text as well. So that's why we nest things. I'm going to delete that to show you another way of doing text. I can click and drag it and put it onto the box. Now it's called text block. I'll leave it at that for now because that's fine, suits my purposes. You'll notice that this isn't quite big enough. Now I could make it bigger, drag it out, you see it moves the thing around. But there's also a button here called size to content, which is really useful. You click that and it will just instantly move your text, your box to fit the text. If I now want to change the text, let's say I'll make this James works at Copper Candle. There you go. And the whole button gets bigger as a result. Let's just make it test though, and now it's made it smaller. So that's a clever feature to make sure that you're working dynamically. You might not want that though if you want to create a range of buttons that all look the same and you've got a fixed user interface. It'll be annoying if they're all different sizes. So yeah, that's up to you. That's about you being an artist ultimately. So there we go, we've got a button. There's loads of little features in here. So if you come down to style, you'll see there's loads of different formats that you can change for how it looks. You've got normal, hovered and pressed. They're the three most important ones that we're going to look at. What this is, when you look at it normally, as in no one's touching it, that's normal in this. So that's how it looks. I've lost it, where's it gone? Oh, I haven't got it selected, there we go. So I told you I'd end up losing it at some point. So normal is how it looks when you're not touching it. If you hover over it, so if I just move my mouse over, how will it look? Well, that's hovered here. So we can change the colour of that to make it slightly lighter. And pressed is what it looks like at the moment you press it. You think about any user interface you have, that's quite common, that you see a colour, you hover over it, it changes to indicate that you've highlighted it, and then when you press it, it gives you a little flash, and then it goes away because you've loaded the button. So they're the three main ones. We could change the image that's behind it. We can do that later when we start playing around with the UI, but for now, that's fine. We just want to show you how this works as a test. So that's a button. It doesn't do anything at the moment. We haven't connected it to anything yet. Let's just try and do something really simple. So we're going to scroll right down here, and we've got these events: on clicked, on pressed, on released, on hovered, on unhovered, and these can all do different things. If I go into my graph, you'll see I've got some events already in here. event tick, event construct, and event pre-construct. These are grayed out because you don't need them yet. We will be using it later, but if you're using these, it will add more what we call draw calls to the application. It means it's processing more, particularly the event tick. It's a very dangerous system to use. We get told quite a lot by programmers because it's generating an event every time the computer cycles, every frame. So if it's processing at 60 frames a second, that means that this 60 times a second, it's calling an event. And I can show you that a bit later. But we want the button event. So we have the button here. I've got it selected. You see if I click it, I get those same 5 options, and every button type of it, have a different system here. It doesn't matter whether I'm in Designer when I click this. I could click it here, or I could click it in the graph. So I'll just do it here. Click on clicked. That's the one we're going to use. And you see, it's just added that to my graph. It's jumped us over to the graph. I'll now have on clicked button test. This here is called the execute pin. Anything that's connected to that will be executed as a result of the button being pressed. So if I drag this out with a left mouse click, when I let go, it will give me options, loads of options, things that we can do. Now this list is huge. It's built up from all the plugins you've installed. So we have got DMX functions in here because we've loaded the DMX plugin. If you loaded any of the Copper Candles products, like CopperStream, for instance, which is another type of DMX protocol, it will appear here near the Copper section because it's been loaded. If you can't find what you're looking for, it's because of this button up here, this tick box. This is called context sensitive because it filters things that it thinks will be useful to you. And generally it can be quite useful, but it also gets it wrong quite a lot of the time. If I untick this, it reloads this list and it's even more stuff here. This is everything that this blueprint can access. I was about to say everything in Unreal, but that's not true because this this blueprint widget can't see everything that another blueprint could see. But most things are in here. You've got a save game, you've got ways of transforming objects, you've got performance changes, you've got networking systems, everything. And you can see there's quite a lot more DMX systems here. We've got DMX, DMX component, DMX fixture, DMX matrix fixture, and DMX GDTF. We'll come to a lot of these over the course of the tutorial. If I click back on context sensitive, we've just got DMX now. It's got rid of the others, okay? And in here, we have got some features that it thinks we can do, that we can use. Now, there's quite a lot of times when what we want isn't listed here. And it's trying to make suggestions what it thinks should live inside this blueprint, but sometimes we need to ignore it. At the moment, we're going to do something really simple. We just want to see if this button work. That's all we're doing in this particular lesson, is just getting a button to do something. And we're going to do something that we're going to use a lot as we're testing, called a print string. So I'm going to type in print string to find it. There it is, under development, print string. Now this is set up now with the executable line. So when we click that button, it will push the event to the print string, and the print string will do an action. Now this could be an action, if it's not a print string, it could be trigger a sound effect or something, but we've got it set up for print string. And what it's going to do is print the words hello. Now I could connect this pin here to something else to create a different word, but for now we're just going to keep this really simple. Just going to say hello. If I click this little arrow here, it gives us more options, so we can change the colour of it, change how long it appears on the screen for, print to the log, which is the text document that's generated underneath Unreal, which is really helpful if something crashes. But print to screen is the one that's really important. We've got to make sure it's loaded, because that's all we're doing right now. It's checking to see if the word hello will appear when we click that button. Now that's all done. So we've got a button called test. It's right in the middle of the screen. We have our graph set up so that when it clicks, it prints to the string. And we need to save it now. Now there's a save button here. The save button's not the most important part of this. The most important part is this button here called compile. Compiling is really necessary, because if you don't compile it, it doesn't check if your code's working for a start. It might be broken, you might have missed something, and that's going to happen to us a lot as we go through this tutorial, particularly when I forget how to do things. But also it will turn something into an object that can be seen by other blueprints, or in some cases you might have like a UI element that's not seen by the blueprint itself. So we have to click compile to make sure it works. So we click compile, and you should get a nice green tick if it's working. If you get like a red circle with a black line in it, that means it hasn't worked, and you have to go in and find the error, which is usually quite obvious. It will point you to it. Once you've compiled, you save every single time. There is a button here that says save on compile, always. You could just do that. I like to just manually click compile, manually click save. Just do it every single time I'm ready to make a change. So that's the UI. So if we go back to our map, how do we get the UI to appear? Now if I click the play button up here, it's going to load our game. Ta-da! We're in game mode now, but we can't see the UI. Where is it? Right. So we need to load it first. We do this in the level blueprint. So up here you've got a few features, which I'm not going into things you don't need to learn, because it's better to be focused and learn a thing and you pick up on real from context. But you've got a way of adding those objects that I showed you earlier, objects of the scene. You've got a blueprint menu and you've got the cinematics menu of adding sequences. We don't need any of those things apart from the blueprint system. We can create blueprint classes up here, of all sorts, but what we actually want is this level blueprint. This is a blueprint that's just like the widget that we've been using. It has, again, filtered events, things that it can and can't do. So for instance, it's got an event begin play, which widgets don't have. It has an event construct. You don't get an event construct with a level blueprint. But this is universal to that level. If we created another map, file save as and called it something else, that would be a completely different level blueprint. But this one is specific to this level, and it will be loaded automatically when the game starts. And we're going to want the event begin play. Let's see if I can remember how to do this. There is a way of loading a viewport. So we're going to go drag that execute pin out, let go, and we're going to create a UI widget. So I'm going to type in create widget. There we go. It's come up. User interface, create widget. Hit enter, and it's going to construct a widget. Class, we need to find our blueprint, and there it is, BP underscore console UI. Now if you've got loads of things you couldn't see it, this is where the BP search idea comes in. You can just search by BP, or you could even create a suffix, which is your custom, what we're doing here is it's a UI element, or maybe it's James's project, but that's all we needed there, the BP console UI. Okay. And now we need to do one other thing. We need to tell it to load it into the viewport. This is where blueprints becomes a bit tricky. It kind of assumes you know all these things, and this is where you end up Googling quite a lot when you can't get something to work. So I'm going to drag out again and go add to viewport, and there it is. Now, we haven't looked at these pins yet, all of these other little pins, but this is where they start to get used, right? It needs a target. If I try to compile this right now, I've got a little red line, red circle, and it comes up here saying error, and it gives me a little tip. This blueprint is not a user widget, therefore target must have a connection. So it's trying to add something to the viewport, but it doesn't know what it is. It's trying to add itself at the moment. So we need to tell it what to look for. Well, that's what this node is doing. It's saying, create this blueprint, draw it out of the content project folder, and add it to something. I don't know what to do with it, but just create for me this user interface. And this one's saying, I need a user interface, and I'm going to put it on the UI, or on the viewport, if you can give me one. So we need the return value to say, yes, I've created this blueprint, BP underscore console UI. Please tell add to viewport, this is the one that they should be using. And you can drag it in and it connects. Now, that lovely green tick is what you're looking for. Number of times you get a little red cross that says this does not connect. It will come up again and again and again, and it's just the way it works. So I'm going to click compile. Sometimes we add an owning player, which will add to the player controller. I can't remember which way around it works at the moment, so I'm going to hit play and see what happens. So compiled, I've got the green tick. I'm going to save, go back to my map, hit play. Oh, look, there we go. And there's my test button, and you can see if I hover over it, it's changing colour slightly. Now, if this has worked, when I click on it, it should create a print string that says hello in the top left corner. So let's have a look. Ta-da! Hello. Every time I click it, it's going to create me a hello. It's going to last 2 seconds because that's how long we set it for. So that's an interaction. We've just built a UI. That's kind of all you need to know. Right? Let's go back into the UI quickly. Let's just see what else we can do. I'm going to go back to the graph, print string. I'm going to change this now to be pink. I'm going to make it last a lot longer, make it last 5 seconds. And I'm going to print copper candle test. Ooh, like that. Okay. Compile, save, and go back and hit play, and now I've got the button again. Copper channel test now in pink. Now there's another thing we're going to do, and this will be the last thing I'll try in this lesson, I promise, okay, is that we might want to bring in a value or a number. So this string can connect to almost anything, and this is why I want to show this to you. We're going to use this a lot to debug, to test, to find out what something's doing. So if I want to draw out a particular number in the project, I could put it in here to see what's going on. So in this case, I actually want to find out what the IP address is of my computer. So I'm going to right click somewhere, that we don't have to always drag out the event to get to this. Turn off context sensitive, because what I'm looking for is probably not what it thinks we're looking for, and type in IP address and see what comes up. That's not what I wanted. MIPS address. Let's try just IP. Try and find it. There's lots of things here that got IP in them. Let's try going to context sensitive, and I'm going to go to DMX, and I want get local DMX network card, network interface cards IP. Right. I'm going to click on that. And it's going to give me a value of the network card, and I'm going to connect this event node to here to say you must now get the DMX network card's IP address and send it to here to load the print string. But we need to connect the in string to the return value. This is telling us what it is. If I try to drag this right now and put it here, I'm getting that circle that I told you wasn't very nice. I want to make that connect. The reason it doesn't connect is because this is an array and this is a single item, and an array is a collection of single values. So we need to convert this into a single value, and we do that with a get. And we're going to do arrays later, the whole lesson on them. So we're going to get a copy. Right, click that, add it in, and now it connects. This number here is the number of the network cards you have. So if you've got 3 network cards, you'll be 0, 1, and 2. Okay, so this is going to give me, because 0 always means 1. This is why I was telling you about my node earlier. It's confusing when 0s, 1s, and 2s don't mean 1, 2, and 3. This will tell me the IP address of my first network card, and I have, I think, 3 on this computer, because I've got a USB network card, I've got a Wi-Fi dongle plugged in, and I've got the actual network port at the back, which is the one that we're using. So hopefully it's going to come up saying 0 is the correct IP, the correct network card. Now what it's going to do is it's going to, when we press the button, it's going to call this function. It's going to say, please tell me the IP address of the network card that the DMX is plugged into. It's going to send it to this get, which is going to strip out all of the other variables and just send us the first one, which is 0, and print it. And that way we know what it thinks the IP address is. So we're going to compile and save. Go back to our DMX console. Let's hit play. And now when I hit test, we should see an IP address. 0.0.0.0. That is correct. That is what I've got my DMX set to. In project settings, I have a setting for DMX down here, and that is where, let's load up fixture settings. No, input ports. Oh, we haven't actually set them up yet. We need to do that still. But the IP address defaults to 0.0.0.0, which means it's listening on all network addresses for what is going in and out of this box. So that's correct. Now there is another node, which also was actually what I was looking for and I couldn't find, which tells you what the PC thinks its IP address is. You can have loads of these things. So here we go. I'm just going to click loads of these. I've got 0.0.0. If I change that value there to 1, it should give me a different. Oh, yeah. Keep forgetting I shouldn't use that number pad because that's controlling OBS. So now I'll try loading that value again, but this time it's looking for the second network address, and now it's 127.0.0.1. Right, so it's quite a useful tool to find out information that Unreal thinks is going on. And once we've got that number, we could actually build that into a UI. So we can actually have a number that changes live when it detects a change in the IP address. So this is where we can start getting a bit clever with our blueprinting. And hopefully that gives you a flavour of what we're going to be doing in all the lessons now as we start to progress with this. So in the next lesson, we are looking at, refer to my notes, we're going to create variables and work out how to share information between the UI and the in the blueprint and send it back again. So that should be a fun lesson.